But Albanese did have an idea today, an idea, not a promise, to supposedly cut your cost of living. How about getting rid of the surcharge that you often have to pay, or that you always have to pay, when you use your debit card to shop?
Bear this in mind, a debit card is taking money directly from people's accounts. It is their money, and there shouldn't be surcharges on it.
But like I said, it's not exactly a promise. There still has to be a Reserve Bank review of the idea.
It's not an announcement. It's just that they're looking at it, and it could come in 2026. Australian families need help now from this government.
And by the way, credit card charges will still apply. Joining me is Sky News Business Editor Ross Greenwood. Ross Greenwood, lovely to see you back. Terrific. Listen, this ending of a surcharge on debit cards, good idea?
Look, in principle, yes, but practicality is something quite different, because ultimately somebody has to pay for the services and the charges. We've changed from a nation that used to have cash to one that now uses primarily debit cards for our payments. And the reality is that all those terminals, when you don't use your own bank to do that transaction, somebody actually has to pay. Now, what happens at the moment is the banks pass it on to small businesses, retailers, who pass it on to you. But the reality is also the big retailers like Woolworths, Coles, Aldi, they pay a whole bunch less for those transactions, sometimes 10 times less for those transactions than what small businesses pay. And so as a result, if you suddenly take away these surcharges, then either your prices are going to go up, or indeed somebody along the line is going to make less profit. Now, the banks would be the ultimate ones. The government would hope would make less money, but they still claim they don't make money out of it as well, which I don't think is quite right. But the reality is that somebody ultimately has to pay. So good politics, but not necessarily that good when it comes down to who ultimately will pay.
Well, that's exactly what I think. If there is a cost to it, they should just be transparent, and then shoppers will know. But if there is a cost to it, these guys are going to want to stay in business. They'll probably just jack up their prices elsewhere in the shop to compensate, won't they? And then we'll never know how much we're really paying.
100%. That is precisely what happens. So therefore, the other problem is that lack of a level playing field when it comes to the price that small retailers pay versus the price that big retailers pay. So if it's simply a case of let's jack up your price, well, if small retailers have to put up their prices more than big retailers have to, you don't have a level playing field when it comes to either profitability or the price you'll pay, depending on which retailer you go to. Now, you might think here, this is all nickel and dime stuff, that it's really a cent here or a few cents here. But no, you start to think about going to buy a new laptop. You think about going to buy a new phone. And these days, you simply will always use your card. But increasingly, what you will do is use your phone. Now, what the government and Reserve Bank put in place at one stage was a thing called lowest cost transactions, basically allowing the routing to go through to what would be the cheapest form of payment. That was a debit card. But what happened was that the use of credit cards collapsed. So the bank simply increased the price of the debit card transaction to the same as the credit card. So the lowest cost routing ultimately did not work. And this is where really the government has got to get it back into some sort of control so that everybody pays the same. And as you point out, it's got to be transparent.
Well, it seems there are actually three sure things in life: death, taxes and banking charges. It sounds to me then, Ross, from what you're saying, that the Prime Minister's action here is a little bit like his social media post the other day complaining of shrinkflation, that we're getting less stuff in the same packages. Something that just makes the government seem to be doing something about this cost of living crisis without actually doing much at all. Am I being too harsh?
No, you're not being too harsh. This is rather interesting territory for the Prime Minister to get into. It's really cheap populist politics ahead of an election campaign, but it's also about distraction. The government, since it's launched inquiries into supermarkets, it's launched inquiries into just about everybody, airlines, except they won't launch an inquiry into themselves because they want to see that the cost of living crisis is about the supermarkets, which have very fine margins, or about banks, in other words, these surcharges, or maybe it's about airlines. It can't possibly be that the government is the cause of the inflation, which is keeping interest rates higher than for longer here in Australia as compared with other parts of the world. And so really the government is about saying, oh, look, we're on your side trying to bring the costs down, this bad shrinkflation, these bad credit card surcharges. But in actual fact, the prime cause of inflation in Australia and why interest rates remain so high is government spending. Government spending is close to record levels right now in Australia, and when the government is pumping more money into the economy, as it has been in the past 12 months, as state governments have in the past 12 months, then guess what? That causes inflation, and that's one of the primary reasons why right now people continue to pay higher interest rates than what they otherwise would. And that's not a message that the government wants to get out ahead of an election, that's for sure.
Ross Greenwood, great to have you back. Thank you so much.